believe what you can show, or just believe from what you know? What make a book holy if God never wrote it? Imagine God was just misquoted. If God was...
You know, people say that our memory got wiped and this and that, right? When we came into the world, right? Can you show me one sin that caused our memory to be wiped? There is not one scripture in the Bible that says when Adam and Eve sinned, they forgot who God was. Show me that verse and I'll take this video down. There is not one sin that caused Adam and Eve to get amnesia and forget who God was. So why are y'all telling us that we need to come know God or that we don't know God? Why are you trying to evangelize us and tell us we need to know God? We need to come and know God. Like, how can Jesus says he never knew people who always knew God? Think about that. How can you remember who your parents are, who your mother, who your father is? We can remember all of that. We can remember our childhood. The first people we recognize when we come into the world is not God. Or maybe it is. If God is the first person that we recognize when we come into the world, then who is that? That's your mother and father. So you mean to tell me you can remember who your mother and father is as a sinner, as a so-called sinner, yet you can't remember who your eternal father is? So we need to reevaluate this knowing God. How can you teach me how to know my creator? That should be something that's innate within all of us, right? If we are spiritual beings and God is a spirit. Why do you have to teach me? Why does a man in a suit on a Sunday morning has to teach me about God? How can you teach me to know God? Nobody had to teach me who my parents was. Nobody had to preach to me or take me to a place outside of myself to know my parents, to know my mother and my father. That was something I already knew. So why is that not the case with this God? Why does God need a book? I didn't have to read a book about my mother and father. So you come to know God by hearing, preaching from a book. That's how you come to know this God. But I thought we already knew God. So how did we lose that memory of knowing God? How did we unknow God? Show me that. Show me where Adam and Eve, after they sinned, they unknew God. They didn't know who God was. God might have got amnesia because he didn't know where Adam was. He might have forgot some things, but Adam and Eve did not. They never forgot who God was. Neither did they fellowship in with God when they sinned against God. For those people who say that we have broken fellowship with God because we sinned against him, okay. Adam and Eve fellowship with God did not end because they sinned against God. And also show me where Adam and Eve went to hell. Where did God condemn them to a hell or an eternal judgment when they sinned against him? So once again, who was the first gods that we recognize? Who did we recognize as God first when we came into existence? And if this sin caused our memory to be wiped, then how did we remember anything? How did we remember our parents? How did we know who they were and forget who God was or is? Think about that.
You wanna hide something from a Christian, hide it in they book. If non-believers know your book better, how that's gonna look. Can't take the heat, get out the kitchen.